What if you've never truly lived inside your body? What if the you that thinks, feels and remembers isn't confined within your skin, your skull, or even this moment? In this journey, we still explore the disorienting idea that your consciousness might be spread across time, embedded in the environment, or entirely outside the physical frame you call self. Each section is a doorway into a theory, an experiment, or a paradox that questions what it means to be you. So lie back, close your eyes, and prepare to unthink everything you thought you were. You're not home. Not yet. The extended mind. You reach for your phone to check the time. Not in your pocket, not in your mind, but somewhere in between, in that space where your fingers move faster than your thoughts. And just like that, you slipped into one of the strangest ideas in modern philosophy. What if your mind isn't set inside your brain at all? The extended mind hypothesis, proposed by philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers in 1998, suggests something radical, that parts of your environment can literally become part of your thinking process. Your notebook, your smartphone, your best friend finishing your sentences. They aren't tools used by the mind. They are the mind, or at least, extensions of it. And this raises a very strange question. If you left your phone in another room, did part of your consciousness just get left behind? Let's rewind. You've always been told the mind is inside the head. Neurons fire, networks connect, memories shuffle, and out of this gooey grey chaos emerges thought. But Clark and Chalmers argue that this view is too narrow. The brain, they say, is more like a central processing unit, and the body, environment, and even social relationships act like peripheral extensions, memory drives, calculators, pattern recognizers, deeply entangled with how we think. Take Otto, a character from their original paper. Otto suffers from Alzheimer's, but keeps a notebook filled with essential facts, addresses, reminders, names, that he consults constantly. His notebook is more than helpful. It's part of his memory. Compare that to Inga, a healthy individual who recalls an address from her biological memory. Is there any functional difference? Clark and Chalmers say no. Otto's notebook is as much a part of his cognitive process as Inga's hippocampus. It's not that he's using memory, he's having memory, just externally. This breaks the skin barrier view of the mind. Suddenly, the boundary between you and not you starts to blur. So what happens when you lose your phone? Is it just a lost object, or an amputation of your mental landscape? We're all Otto now. Think about how many thoughts you outsource: directions, names, memories, passwords, appointments. These aren't things we know anymore, they're things we know how to find. And that retrieval process is now automatic. You don't step remember. You reach. You don't sit calculate. You Google. You don't store. You sync. This isn't sept weakness, it's sept's evolution. But it also means your mind is no longer a neatly contained thing. It's leaky, expansive, scattered across Wi-Fi signals, cloud servers, browser histories, shared jokes, favorite books, and half-written notes on your desk. There's an eerie consequence here. If your thoughts are entangled with tools, then what happens when the tools change? What happens to you when your data is deleted? What happens to you when your routines are disrupted? What happens to you when your extensions break? You shrink, you adapt, you rebuild, but you do not remain untouched. Because consciousness in this view isn't sealed inside the skull, it's relational. It lives in the feedback loops between you and the world. This also means identity is portable. You can carry part of yourself in your bag. You can lose part of yourself at the airport. You can feel disoriented not because of mental illness, but because your extensions are missing, your bookmarks are gone, your playlists silent, your rituals disrupted. The mind, like a spider, spins a web of dependencies and calls that web home. Wherever that web reaches, so does thought. And yet, even as you accept this, something resists. You feel like you stare inside. You feel like a self observing a world, not entangled in it. But maybe that feeling is just another illusion, born from habits of attention. The truth may be stranger. You are not in your body. You are with it. You are through it. But not inside it. You are sprawled out, across the touchscreens and thoughts of others. You are the system, not the source. You are not the brain. You are the network. And every time you forget a fact, and instinctively reach for your device, you're not cheating. You still remembering. Through your hand. Through the glass. through the world. Your consciousness isn't sit inside your body. It never was. The brain in space. You've always been told that your consciousness lives somewhere between your ears, that if you could somehow peel back the scalp, dive past the bone, and swim through the folds of your brain, you'd eventually stumble across you. But what if that assumption is just a comforting story? What if your brain is only the spark, not the flame? In 2014, researchers studying astronauts aboard the International Space Station noticed something strange. Prolonged exposure to zero gravity didn't just affect muscles and bones, it rewired cognition, spatial orientation, emotional regulation. Even dreams began to shift. The mind, it seemed, was deeply tethered to the physical pull of gravity. But when gravity let go, so did something else. The illusion of being centered inside your body. You see, on Earth, your brain has spent a lifetime learning up from down. It knows where your limbs are because it can feel the ground beneath your feet and the weight of your own head. This spatial map helps you feel located, rooted, present. But in space, that map collapses. Up is gone. Down is meaningless. And the feeling of I am here begins to drift, just like the body. Some astronauts describe out-of-body experiences, not hallucinations, but a real sensation of observing themselves from afar. Others report that their sense of location shifts outside the body entirely, sometimes merging with the spacecraft. One cosmonaut even said, "It felt like my mind was hovering 3 feet behind my back." That isn't sit poetry. That sits neurology untethered. What happens in microgravity reveals a fundamental truth. The feeling of being inside your body is a learned simulation. Its steps fragile, dependent, conditional. And when the physical cues vanish, so does the boundary. The brain uses a network called the temporoparietal junction to construct this illusion of embodied self-location. It stitches together touch, proprioception, and visual input to simulate a center of experience. But this center can glitch. Stroke victims with damage to that area have reported bizarre experiences, like watching their body from the ceiling. Patients with autoscopic phenomena see themselves doubled, as if consciousness split off like a shadow. And all it takes is a mild electrical stimulation in the right part of the brain to induce the sensation of floating outside your own skull. So now ask yourself, where are you really? Is it your eyes? Your spine? Your hands? If your sense of self can drift just by flipping gravity or shocking a few neurons, then how solid was it in the first place? Maybe your brain is just a staging ground, a platform that produces a show, and your consciousness. It might be the projection, not the projector. We tend to think of thoughts as belonging to us, like birds nesting in the attic of the skull. But what if thoughts are more like echoes, passing through a field? What if the brain is simply tuning into patterns, not generating them? This leads to a fringe, yet fascinating, interpretation known as brain as receiver theory. It proposes that the brain isn't the origin of consciousness, but rather the mechanism by which it is received, filtered, and experienced. Much like a radio doesn't create music, it catches it. The implications are wild. If your brain is a receiver, then the signal, the real you, might be non-local, spread out, dissented, floating somewhere beyond synapses and skulls. You might not be in your brain. You might be through it. And the disorientation astronauts feel in space may not be distortion. It may be clarity. It may be what happens when the brain SIP's usual filters are disrupted, and you glimpse what you really are. A field of awareness that isn't contained, but connected. Not inside the body, but surrounding it. Not bound to mass, but hovering in motion. In other words, consciousness in space behaves like it always wanted to be there. Weightless, untethered, finally free from the illusion of containment. So as you lie there, still on Earth, you might ask, how much of you depends on gravity? On friction? On being somewhere? And if those physical anchors vanished, would you vanish too? Or would you expand? The truth may be floating, just behind your back, or above your head, or nowhere at all, because your consciousness isn't sealed inside your body. It starts not where you are. It sits where you feel you are. And that feeling is optional. The Mirrorworld Hypothesis. There is a moment, quiet, unsettling, when you stare into a mirror just a little too long. At first, you see yourself, then something else. Your face becomes unfamiliar. Your eyes blink at the wrong time. The reflection lags, or smirks, or tilts in a way your head didn't. You've just crossed the threshold into what some call the mirror world, and it's a theory far stranger than superstition. Let's begin with a simple fact. You've never seen your own face. Not directly. Not ever. You've only seen reflections. Proxies. Representations. Even your voice is alien to your own ears. Played back, it sounds like someone else entirely. You are known to others more accurately than you are known to yourself. You live inside, but are seen only from outside. And that's where the mirror world begins. A psychological and philosophical space where your reflection isn't just mimicking you, it's constructing you. In ancient myth, mirrors were portals to other realms. But today, cognitive science suggests they might be portals to the self as other. Here's the twist. Every time you look in a mirror, your brain performs a complex inversion. Left becomes right. Depth becomes flat. And yet, the reflection feels normal, until it doesn't. When the illusion falters, as in the strange face illusion, people report seeing their face morph, melt, or become a stranger's entirely. Psychologist Giovanni Caputo studied this phenomenon. In a dimly lit room, participants stared into a mirror for 10 uninterrupted minutes. Within moments, most began to hallucinate. Deformed features, demonic visages, entirely different identities staring back. They described a deep sense of dissociation, as if their consciousness was leaving their body and merging with the reflection. Why? Because your brain's model of the self is not static, it's an active construction, and under the right conditions that construction unravels. The mirror doesn't reflect you. It creates a version of you, and in doing so, it questions where you truly are. If your consciousness was inside your body, why is it so easily displaced by a reflection? This leads to the Mirrorworld Hypothesis, the idea that your sense of self is partly constructed externally, through feedback loops of sight, symmetry, and expectation. Just like the extended mind uses tools to think, the mirror world uses visual feedback to build identity. Take infants. Before 18 months old, babies don't recognize themselves in mirrors. They reach out to touch the glass, confuse their reflection for another baby, or ignore it entirely. It's only through repeated exposure and social reinforcement that they begin to associate that image with me. So the self begins in the mirror. Which means your consciousness is scaffolded by surfaces. You are not born knowing where you are. You are taught. Taught to look outward to know what's inward. But what happens when the mirror lies? In cases of Capgras delusion, patients believe their loved ones have been replaced by identical imposters. The reason? Their brain recognizes the face, but emotional recognition, the self-to-other resonance, fails. Now flip that inward. If your brain fails to emotionally recognize your own face, the mirror becomes a mask. And you become someone else. This isn't set just clinical, it's set existential. If a flicker in perception can sever you from your reflection, then how fragile is the self? How easily can it be nudged out of the body, or duplicated in glass? The mirror world isn't set, just the image you see. It steps the loop it creates. You see your face, believe it's you, feel yourself being that face. But this loop can be hijacked. Through lighting, through suggestion, through stillness. And once that loop breaks, consciousness slips. Some spiritual traditions use mirrors to dissolve the ego. Some magicians use them to induce trance. Some experimental VR studies place participants in virtual mirrored rooms where the self seems to multiply, stretch, or even vanish. The more reflections, the less centered the consciousness becomes. Because each mirror is a question. Is that me? Am I here? Or there? Maybe consciousness isn't located in the body, but in the relationships between surfaces. Maybe you don't exist until you are reflected by a mirror, a screen, a person. Maybe identity is a hall of mirrors, recursive, fragile, endless. And if that's true, then you can be anywhere a reflection forms. In the shimmer of a lake, in a webcam, in the eyes of a stranger. You are a pattern bouncing between surfaces, an echo returning to itself. A self constructed in delay, never quite present, always refracted. So next time you stare into a mirror and feel a flicker of unease, don't look away. That flicker might be the truth trying to surface. You are not inside your body. You are outside, watching from the glass. And what watches is not always what is seen. The shadow self. There is a part of you that you never speak to. It watches. It remembers. And sometimes, when you sit tired enough or alone enough or quiet enough, it steps just a little too close, and you feel it. That subtle shift in your own mind where something else seems to be listening with you. Welcome to the realm of the shadow self. Not just a psychological metaphor, but a theory that challenges where consciousness actually begins and ends. The term shadow comes from Carl Jung, who believed every person carries within them a second self, not evil, not monstrous, but simply unknown. These are the traits, emotions and impulses you sit exiled. The rage you don't stack express. The joy you don't set permit. The beliefs you reject. Over time, they don't set disappear. They grow darker, and they step behind you. But here sips the paradox. If these unconscious fragments influence your choices, shape your fears, and drive your desires, then who sits really in control? Where does you end, and your shadow begin? This isn't just metaphorical. Studies in neuroscience show that most decisions are made before we are consciously aware of them. In Libet's famous experiment, participants were asked to perform simple actions, like flexing a finger, and note the exact moment they decided to do so. Brain activity predicted their decisions up to 7 seconds before they became aware of them. 7 seconds. That means the I that thinks it's making choices might actually be the afterthought, not the source. The conscious self is not a driver. It's a narrator, stitching together post hoc justifications for decisions already made. So, who made them? Perhaps the shadow self, a non-verbal intelligence that exists outside your narrative consciousness, acting from the body, the past, or something older still. And perhaps this shadow is not in your body either, but diffused across memory, language, and learned behaviors. Not a place, but a presence. Let's go deeper. In split-brain patients, where the corpus callosum connecting the brain hemispheres is severed, strange things happen. One hand buttons a shirt, the other unbuttons it. One hemisphere speaks, the other acts independently, silently. Two selves, one body, neither fully in control. Where then is consciousness? You may think there is a central you behind the eyes, but evidence suggests you are more like a federation. A parliament of selves, constantly shifting, debating, suppressing, forgetting. The shadow self is part of that parliament, the member whose microphone is usually turned off, but whose votes still count. And sometimes, it takes the floor. Ever had a moment where you said something you didn't mean, and felt like it came from someone else? Ever acted out of character, and wondered afterward, why did I do that? That wasn't you being irrational. That was a part of you being briefly, terrifyingly visible. Now imagine this. What if your shadow self doesn't live in your body, but in others? Jung suggested that we often project our shadow onto other people. The traits we most dislike in others often mirror our disowned parts. So when you judge, mock, or even fall obsessively in love, you might not be seeing them at all. You might be seeing you. In this view, consciousness isn't a single interior space. It's a shifting boundary between what is accepted and what is denied. And that boundary often extends beyond the skin. You are not a self. You are a negotiation. Which means that part of you may exist, psychologically, in the people you hate, in the memories you repress, in the cultures you reject, in the versions of yourself you never became. The shadow self lives in every fork in the path you didn't take. And sometimes, it waits. When you dream of chasing someone you can't catch, or running from someone who looks exactly like you, that's not fantasy. That's the mind confronting its own unclaimed fragments. And in those moments, you are not inside your body. You are watching from the edge of a self you don't recognize. You are the pursued, and the pursuer. So the next time you feel something stir in your chest, a sudden, irrational emotion, a whisper of an old impulse, a flicker of someone you could have been, don't dismiss it. Don't fear it. Because that too is you. The parts that never spoke. The mind behind the mind. Your consciousness isn't set fully inside your body. It leaks into silence. It waits in mirrors. It echoes in dreams. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it answers back. The dreamer sips illusion. You close your eyes. And the world does not disappear. It expands. You're falling through a city that wasn't there. You're speaking with people who don't exist. Time folds, rooms shift, and you believe it all, until you wake up. And then you wonder, if you could believe so completely in a world that wasn't set real, how sure are you that this one is? This is the core of the dreamer's illusion. The theory that the boundary between waking and dreaming isn't as solid as it seems, and that the consciousness you inhabit during dreams might reveal something disturbing about where you actually reside. Let's begin with a simple observation. In dreams, you often experience yourself as having a body. You feel heat, pain, fear, hunger, joy. But where is that body? Where are those senses coming from? Your eyes are closed. Your muscles are paralyzed. You are lying motionless in a bed. And yet, you're there, running, dancing, dying, flying. Who is feeling all of this? If your body is out of commission, and yet experience continues, then your consciousness isn't locked inside that flesh. It sits somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't need organs, or location, or even time. Studies in lucid dreaming have shown that dreamers can become aware they are dreaming, and still remain inside the dream. They can manipulate objects, converse with characters, even ask the dream itself questions. And the responses often come, not from logic, but from something deeper, something that feels autonomous. Who answers you in a dream? Where is that voice stored? In Tibetan Buddhism, advanced dream yoga teaches that dreams are not unreal. They are merely unanchored. They are as valid an experience as waking life, but they reveal that the self is a construct, one that doesn't require a physical home. You don't wake up to truth. You wake up to habit. And when dreams show you how easily your brain can create entire worlds, complete with gravity, physics, emotion, and continuity, you begin to realize something unnerving. Consciousness is not something you carry in your body. It's something that projects reality around itself. It dreams worlds into being, and calls that me. Neurologist Olaf Blanke has studied presence hallucinations, the sense that someone is standing nearby when no one is there. Often these hallucinations appear in dreams, but they also occur in waking states. And the same neural circuitry is involved, which means the dreamer's illusion doesn't end when you open your eyes. Your waking life might just be another layer of dream, one that's more persistent, more structured, but no less constructed. Now, consider this. When you dream, the you inside the dream often doesn't know it's dreaming. It believes the rules. It feels real emotions. It builds meaning. But what happens when the dreamer wakes up inside the dream? That's what a lucid dream is. And some spiritual and philosophical systems suggest that this moment, when you become aware of the dream while still in it, is the closest thing to enlightenment. Because it means your consciousness has escaped the illusion of location. You are no longer in the dream. You are watching it unfold from somewhere else. And here sits the twist. Some people experience lucid dreams that continue even after they think they've woken up. A false awakening. A dream inside a dream. What if this is one too? What if your consciousness is still dreaming, just at a higher resolution? There's no empirical proof that waking life isn't another nested illusion. Philosophers like Descartes, and more recently Chalmers and Bostrom, have asked whether reality is simulated. But maybe it doesn't matter. Because the real question is not whether the world is real. It's whether yourself is. If you can feel pain without a body. If you can form relationships with people who don't exist. If you can live an entire life while lying still. Then who are you, really? The dreamer's illusion suggests that the self is untethered. It doesn't need a spine. It doesn't need breath. It doesn't even need continuity. It only needs awareness, the ability to notice. And that noticing might come from a place far beyond your physical form. So next time you wake up and say, "Oh, it was just a dream," ask yourself, what makes this any different? Maybe your consciousness is dreaming this world too. And maybe it sits waiting for the moment you wake up inside it. You stir, not in your body. You stir somewhere else. Watching the story unfold. Split brain paradox. You think you are one person, one self, one voice, one body, one stream of thoughts moving forward through time. But what if you set not? What if there are two of you, or more, housed within the same skull, arguing silently in parallel? Welcome to the split brain paradox, one of the most unsettling discoveries in neuroscience, one that doesn't just challenge the location of consciousness. It shatters the idea of a unified self altogether. Let's go back to the 1960s. To treat severe epilepsy, surgeons performed a radical procedure. They severed the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of nerves connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. The result? The seizures stopped. But something else happened. Something that no one expected. When split-brain patients were tested, their behavior suggested something deeply weird. Each hemisphere began to act like it had its own independent mind. Here sits one of the most famous examples. A patient is shown two images, a snow scene to the left visual field, processed by the right brain, and a chicken claw to the right visual field, processed by the left brain. He's then asked to choose a related image with each hand. His left hand points to a shovel. His right hand points to a chicken. Makes sense. Shovel for snow, chicken for claw. But when asked why he chose the shovel, the left hemisphere, the one that handles language, is unaware of what the right hemisphere saw. So it invents a reason. Well, you need a shovel to clean out the chicken coop. He isn't such lying. His language center is just doing what it always does, explaining behavior, even when it has no access to the truth. This is the paradox. You have two brains, and only one of them can speak. The left hemisphere narrates, explains, reasons. But it sits not always informed. It's like a press secretary, confident, persuasive, and frequently wrong. The right hemisphere, meanwhile, handles spatial awareness, emotion, pattern recognition, and when disconnected, it becomes a silent witness, or a silent actor. There are recorded cases of split-brain patients whose hands fought each other. One hand reaches for a shirt. The other pulls it away. One hand opens a drawer. The other slams it shut. One patient even said, "Sometimes my left hand does things I haven't decided to do." Let that sink in. A body with two wills, two minds, and no single place where you exist. So where is your consciousness? Is it in the left hemisphere, because it talks? Is it in the right, because it understands emotions and wholeness? Or is it neither, just an illusion of unity built from their constant negotiation? This isn't just about surgery. It sips about the fragility of self. Because even with a corpus callosum, your hemispheres are still distinct. They process the world differently. They notice different things. They even have different personalities. You are already a divided mind. You just don't feel divided. Because the illusion of unity is strong. But it sips just that, an illusion. The split-brain paradox doesn't just show that consciousness isn't in the body. It shows it might not be in one place at all. It might be a committee, a coalition, a truce. And what if those parts disagree? In a famous experiment, split-brain patients were asked to follow commands that only one hemisphere could see. When the right hemisphere was told to stand up, the patient did. But when asked why, the left hemisphere, unaware of the command, would say something like, "I just felt like stretching." This means your reasons for acting may be post-rationalized, stories told by one part of you to make sense of what another part decided. Free will becomes fuzzy. Agency becomes shared. And the self, it starts to dissolve. Because if two consciousnesses can live in one body, then what makes you one? Maybe your sense of being a single self is not a reflection of truth, but a strategy. A story that keeps the chaos at bay. A narrative glue holding together the parts that would otherwise pull apart. And if that glue can be severed, if that unity can fracture with a single surgical cut, then, was it ever truly there? Your consciousness isn't sit inside your body. It sips not even inside your brain. It steps between brains, between signals, between fictions. You are not one. You are many. And still, somehow, you dream you sit a whole. The Doppelgänger Problem. You're walking down the street when you spot someone familiar. They move like you, dress like you. Their face, almost identical. They glance in your direction. And for a split second, the world tilts. Because it sips you. Or, it looks like you. But you steer standing right here, aren't sit you. This is the unsettling phenomenon known as the Doppelgänger Problem, the ancient belief, modern theory, and psychological glitch that challenges not just who you are, but where you are. Throughout history, cultures have warned about seeing one's double. In Norse mythology, they were called Vardæger, spirit forerunners. In German folklore, a doppelganger was a harbinger of death. In Egyptian tradition, the cow was a spiritual twin that could separate from the body. But in cognitive science, this myth is beginning to look less supernatural and more neurological. People with certain neurological conditions, particularly autoscopic hallucinations, report seeing a double of themselves, often from a third-person perspective. They might see this other self standing beside them, mirroring them, or even walking away. Sometimes the double behaves independently. Sometimes it watches. But always, it destabilizes the sense of self. Here steps what sits truly bizarre. These experiences occur in patients who are fully awake, fully aware, and otherwise mentally sound. So what's going on? It appears that these phenomena are linked to disturbances in the temporoparietal junction, the same brain region involved in the perception of the body in space. When this region is disrupted, the brain can no longer accurately integrate signals from vision, proprioception, and touch. The result? A decoupling of the self. Your consciousness no longer knows where you are, so it generates two of you. But here sits the deeper implication. If a glitch in signal integration can split you into two people, then maybe the sense of being a single self inside a single body is not hardwired. Maybe it's just the default setting, until it isn't. What if your consciousness isn't located where you think it is? What if the you that experiences the world isn't fully aligned with the body at all, just assigned to it, until something disrupts the mapping? That's exactly what happens in heutoscopy, a rare condition in which people not only see their double but become confused about which self is real. They might say, "I didn't know which one was me." Or worse, "I felt like both, and neither." This is not a dream. This is waking dislocation. Let's pause and ask the existential question. If two versions of you can be perceived simultaneously, and both seem subjectively real, then which one is you? Is it the one that feels real? The one that looks back? The one that others can touch? And what happens when both seem equally valid? You are forced to confront a terrifying possibility. Consciousness may not be a point in space. It may be a zone, or even a duplicate process, capable of being represented in multiple locations at once. In fact, experiments with VR-induced doppelgangers show that people can be tricked into identifying with virtual bodies outside their physical self. The brain relocates the sense of ownership. You feel like you are over there, in pixels. This has huge implications. Because if consciousness can jump bodies, even simulated ones, then it was never in the body to begin with. It was always a projection. Always a story. Your doppelganger is not a glitch. It is a mirror. It shows you the absurdity of self-localization. And if technology can produce doubles, if illness can produce doubles, if dreams, myths, and metaphors across time have all hinted at this fracturing, then maybe there is no original you at all. Just iterations. Just selves. Just overlapping narratives claiming to be central. So the next time you feel like you sit being watched, it might not be paranoia. It might be a forgotten fragment. A split perspective. A residual consciousness that never fully anchored to your skin. Your doppelganger is not out there. It is what watches from behind your eyes, and sometimes steps outside for air, because your consciousness isn't sealed in your skull. Its dut's not limited to one place. Not always. Not anymore. Quantum observer loops. You look at a particle. It behaves like a wave. You measure it. It becomes a point. The universe, it seems, doesn't settle into being until you show up to observe it. But what does that make you? An observer? Or a participant? Or something stranger still? This is the doorway to one of the most mind-bending ideas in both physics and consciousness studies. Quantum observer loops. The idea that your very act of observation might be entangled with reality itself, and that your consciousness could exist not inside your brain, but inside the act of observation. Let's go back to the famous double-slit experiment. When particles, say photons or electrons, are fired at a barrier with two slits, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern on the other side. But when you observe them, when you try to detect which slit the particle goes through, the interference disappears. The particle collapses into a fixed state. It stips as if the particle knows it, stips being watched. Now let's turn that around. If observation can affect matter, then what exactly is the observer? Physicist John Wheeler took this to its limit in his delayed choice experiment. In it, the decision to observe a particle's path is made after the particle has already entered the apparatus. And yet, the observation still appears to retroactively determine how the particle behaved. That sits right. The future seems to affect the past, and your conscious choice to look changes what happened. Let that sink in. You are not a passive witness. You are a recursive participant. Reality doesn't just unfold around you, it unfolds through you. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that reality is not fully real until it is observed. That at the smallest scales, the universe exists in a haze of probabilities, potential states, and only resolves into definite outcomes when a conscious observer intervenes. But here sits where it gets even weirder. If observation collapses the wave function, and if consciousness is required for observation, then where does that consciousness exist? Is it inside the body, watching outward? Or is it outside the system entirely, collapsing probabilities from a position beyond space-time? This is where quantum observer loops come in. They suggest that consciousness and reality are caught in a feedback loop, one that cannot be reduced to mere mechanics. You observe the world, and the world responds to being observed. But you are part of the world. So, are you observing yourself? This recursive loop mirrors ideas in Eastern philosophy, especially in Vedanta and Dzogchen, where awareness is seen as self-knowing, self-illuminating. In these traditions, the witness is not a part of the body. It is something beyond, something unchanging, spaceless, formless. Modern theorists like Donald Hoffman argue that what we perceive as reality is more like a user interface. Just as the desktop on your computer hides the circuits and code underneath, your sensory world hides the quantum structure beneath it. You don't see reality. You see symbols, icons for survival. But what sits behind the icons? Some suggest that consciousness isn't a byproduct of brains. It's a fundamental field, woven into the very fabric of the universe. What physicist Andre Lindy called a necessary component of the cosmos. So now we return to the question, where are you? If your consciousness is needed to collapse a quantum wave, if your decision now can ripple backward through time, if your reality is shaped not just by what is, but by what is seen, then maybe you are not inside the body at all. Maybe the body is part of the illusion being observed. And you, the observer, exist outside the illusion. You might not be a figure on the screen. You might be the eye behind it, watching the world render in real time, changing it simply by witnessing. This is the paradox. The more we try to locate consciousness, the more it seems to vanish. The more we try to measure reality, the more it becomes fluid. And the more we assume we are in the body, the more evidence we find that we are not. You may be a loop, a wave of observation folding into itself. A question the universe keeps asking and answering in the same breath. Your consciousness isn't inside your body. It's dips entangled in everything. And when you look closely enough, you don't find an answer. You find yourself looking back, the outsourced self. You leave your house without your phone and suddenly feel amputated, disoriented, not because you're lost, but because part of you is missing. No contacts, no calendar, no memory, no map. And for a moment, the panic isn't about technology. It steps about identity. Welcome to the age of the outsourced self, a psychological and philosophical theory, suggesting that your consciousness may no longer be confined to your biological brain at all. Because you've given parts of it away, let's be honest, you don't remember things anymore. You Google them. You don't decide what to eat. You scroll. You don't reflect. You refresh. The modern mind doesn't just use tools, it relies on them to function. But what if the line between tool and self is gone? Philosophers Clarke and Chalmers, who also proposed the extended mind hypothesis, warned us years ago, as soon as external objects are used consistently, automatically, and transparently in our cognitive process, they become part of the system that thinks. You stir not using your phone, you stir becoming it. But this outsourcing goes deeper than just convenience. We offload our emotions into curated playlists. We offload our memory into social media timelines. We offload our validation into likes, comments, shares. Each time we delegate part of our inner life to the outer world, we dissolve the boundary between mind and machine. Here sits the twist. You feel the phone is separate. You know it SIPs a device, but your brain doesn't sit care. Neurologically, when people lose their phones, they show withdrawal symptoms similar to limb loss. Their anxiety spikes. Phantom vibrations occur. The body believes the tool was part of itself. So maybe the self isn't SIPed, just leaky. Maybe it SIPs modular. Plug and play. And the modules, the apps, the networks, the screens are no longer passive interfaces. They sit the limbs of thought, organs of the modern psyche. This isn't set just a metaphor. Studies in brain-computer interface show that people can learn to control machines with their thoughts. With training, the brain adapts, forming new neural pathways as if the machine were part of the body. But there sips a catch. When the interface is removed, people often report feeling less whole. It sips as if their mind had expanded and then collapsed. So what is you? Is it the skin you stare in? Or the system you access? Let's take memory. In the past, memory was internal. Names, numbers, addresses, birthdays. Now, it sips all externalized. You no longer have to remember, you just have to remember how to find. Your brain offloads the content and keeps only the pathways, which means your self is not a storehouse. It sets a search engine, and every app you use, every notification you receive, becomes part of the cognitive loop. When your mind reaches out into the cloud for information, is that thought still yours? Or is it borrowed, shared, outsourced? And when someone deletes your data, what did they delete? A file? Or a fragment of your identity? The outsourced self implies that you are no longer a sealed consciousness operating in isolation. You are a distributed network, sprawled across silicon, fiber optics, and social graphs. Part of you exists in passwords, playlists, pinned messages. Part of you exists in group chats you no longer read, but still feel emotionally tied to. Part of you is out there, floating, sinking, buffering. So when we talk about consciousness, we can't just ask where it is. We have to ask how it is structured. And increasingly, that structure is collective, co-authored, crowdsourced. Think of the way you navigate the day. You use maps to move, AI to translate, algorithms to recommend, feedback loops to affirm. Your thoughts don't come from nowhere. They are triggered by the interface. And when the interface disappears, when the Wi-Fi drops, or the screen cracks, or the inbox goes silent, what disappears with it? Silence used to be peace. Now it feels like disconnection. So where are you, really? You are in the device. In the dialogue, in the search bar, in the login, in the waiting. Your consciousness isn't sit inside your body. It's scattered across systems you no longer fully understand. You stir not just thinking with the world, you stir thinking as it. And somewhere, behind all the tabs you've opened and forgotten to close, a version of you is still waiting, buffering, spinning, phantom body syndrome. Imagine waking up after a surgery and reaching out to scratch an itch on a limb that sits no longer there. You feel the pain, you feel the presence, but your arm is gone. Your body knows it's missing, and yet insists it's still whole. This is phantom limb syndrome, a well-documented phenomenon where amputees continue to feel sensations including pain from body parts that have been removed. But if the limb is gone, and the nerves are severed, then what exactly is being felt? And more importantly, where is the consciousness that feels it? Let's go deeper. Neurologist V.S. Ramachandran once treated a patient who had lost his arm, but still felt his hand clenching painfully. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't unclench it. The pain was excruciating, but the hand did not exist. So Ramachandran built a mirror box. By placing the remaining hand into one side of the box and its reflection into the other, the brain was tricked into seeing two hands. When the patient opened his visible hand, the brain believed the phantom had opened too, and the pain vanished. The body didn't heal. The mind simply believed it did. This tells us something profound. Your body, as you know it, is not a physical thing. It sips a map in your brain, a mental construct, a projection, and like all projections, it can glitch. Now extend this further. Some people experience whole body phantom sensations, not just limbs but torsos, faces, internal organs. Others feel extra limbs, or mislocated ones. In rare cases, people with body integrity identity disorder, BID, feel that a certain limb doesn't belong to them, as if their brain map and physical form don't align. They sit not delusional. Their neural structure genuinely doesn't include that limb in its model of the body. So what happens when the internal map and external form no longer match? Suffering, displacement, disorientation, and a deep existential question. If your sense of having a body can exist without the body itself, then where does that body exist? It starts not in the flesh. It sets in perception, which means your consciousness isn't set housed inside the body. It SERPs housed in the idea of the body. You are not your skin. You are the model of your skin. And that model is changeable. Consider this. People born without limbs can also experience phantom sensations. They never had the limb, and yet they feel it. So the body map doesn't just come from experience. It comes from expectation, from structure in the brain that exists regardless of external input. Now imagine all the parts of your identity you think are real. Your voice, your posture, your sense of touch, your height, your walk. What if all of these are just phantoms of a deeper map? When a stroke disrupts the somatosensory cortex, patients can lose awareness of a body part, even while looking directly at it. Others may feel foreign limbs growing from their side, or deny that an entire half of their body belongs to them. The sense of embodiment is flexible, malfunctioning, negotiable. And if you can feel a hand that doesn't exist, or lose one that does, then what else in yourself is simulated? Maybe your thoughts are phantom. Maybe your emotions are echoes. Maybe your eye is an artificial knot tying all these sensations together into something coherent. But coherence is not truth. It accepts just comfort. The phantom body syndrome teaches us that the self is not a physical object, but a process, a loop, a feeling of continuity, based on prediction, not presence. And if consciousness can feel what sits not there, can hurt from an absence, can be located in illusion, then maybe it was never truly located in the body to begin with. You are the map, not the territory. The feeling, not the fact. The echo, not the origin. So next time you feel a pain you can sit trace, or a longing you can sit explain, ask yourself, is this a memory? A phantom? The residue of a self I once believed in? Because your consciousness isn't sit in your body. It seps in the ghost of the body. And sometimes, the ghost is more real than the flesh ever was. The memory echo. You recall a moment from your past. A soft voice in a hallway. The smell of dust on a summer curtain. A sentence someone whispered years ago that changed you. But you weren't sit recording that moment. And yet, it plays back, vivid as light. So where has it been all this time? This is the mystery of the memory echo. The theory that your memories may not be stored inside your brain at all, but instead ripple through something larger, something distributed, something outside. Let steps begin with the basics. For decades, neuroscience has believed that memories are encoded through synaptic connections, the strengthening or weakening of neural pathways. You remember because neurons fire together and wire together. Experience etches itself into your biology. End of story. But here steps where the story fractures. In the 1950s, researchers performed a strange and disturbing experiment. They trained rats to navigate mazes, then systematically removed parts of their brains to see where the memory lived. The result? The rats still remembered. No matter which section was removed, the knowledge persisted. This led to the theory of holographic memory, the idea that memory might be distributed across the brain, not stored in one fixed spot. Like a hologram, where each part contains the whole. But even more radical is this question. What if memory isn't stepped in the brain at all? Consider morphic resonance, a controversial theory proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake. He suggests that memory, both personal and collective, is stored in fields outside the brain. That habits, behaviors, and even forms exist because of a kind of non-local memory field that shapes organisms over time. According to this theory, your brain doesn't store memories, it tunes into them. Like a radio doesn't store music, it receives it. Your memories might be echoes, not inside your skull, but resonating in the environment. Your mind then becomes an interface, not a vault. Let's test that with something real. Have you ever smelled something, just a faint scent, and been instantly transported to a childhood room? Not just an image, but a full immersion, sound, emotion, texture. Where was that memory hiding? Certainly not in the molecules of the perfume. And if the brain simply stored chemical codes, why is the recall so experiential? Maybe memory isn't set to file. Maybe it sips a place, a state, a frequency. Modern experiments in epigenetics show that traumatic experiences can alter gene expression, and these changes can be passed down generations. Your grandmother's grief might live in your stress responses. You might be echoing memories you never lived. So what sips you, and what sips inherited? What sips recalled, and what sips absorbed? The memory echo doesn't care about your categories. It only cares about resonance. Consider déjà vu, the uncanny sensation that you've been here before. Some neuroscientists chalk it up to misfiring neural pathways, but others argue it might point to non-linear memory, the possibility that time isn't one-directional, and that memory might be bleeding backward from the future. If so, then you sip to not remembering the past. You stir being remembered by time itself. This changes everything. If memories can be inherited, distributed, or even non-temporal, then maybe consciousness isn't set built from memory. Maybe memory is a side effect of something deeper. And maybe what you call you, your identity, your story, yourself, is just the most consistent echo in the noise. A reverberation you said mistaken for a source. But the source might not be in the body. It might not be in the past. It might not be yours. You felt it. The strange sense that something is remembering through you. A story rising, not from choice, but from somewhere beneath or beyond. And when you try to speak it, the words feel older than your voice. Because your consciousness doesn't live inside your brain. It ripples. It reflects. It remembers in circles. And when you pause, when you listen, you'll hear it. The faint echo of a memory you never made, and yet have always carried. The perception cage. You open your eyes, and the world appears. Light, color, shape, sound. It feels direct, immediate. You think you start seeing reality. But what if you set not? What if you stir inside a cage? A perfectly designed one. Not made of iron bars, but of perception itself? This is the perception cage, a theory grounded in neuroscience, philosophy, and evolutionary psychology, which suggests your consciousness is not simply trapped in your body, it's filtered by it. And those filters are not designed for truth. They designed for survival. Let's start with a brutal idea. The human brain didn't evolve to see the world as it is. It evolved to see the world in a way that helped you stay alive. That's not the same thing. As cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman puts it, perception is not about seeing reality. It's about seeing fitness payoffs. In one experiment, Hoffman ran simulations in which virtual creatures with truthful perception of their environment competed against creatures that only saw what was useful. The result? The useful ones won. Every time. Why? Because reality is too complex. And truth is too slow. So your senses give you a simplified model. Your consciousness accepts the model as real. And that model becomes the cage. Take vision. You think you see the world in high-definition color? But your eye only captures a small slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, less than 1/10 trillionth. Bees see ultraviolet. Snakes see infrared. Bats navigate with sound. To each creature, the world appears totally different. So whose version is real? The answer is none. Or maybe all. Because reality isn't what seps out there. It seps what your nervous system lets in. Now consider your attention. You can only consciously process about 50 bits of information per second. That's less than the bandwidth of a low-quality modem. So your brain filters out 99.999% of what sips happening around you, and presents a curated feed. You are not perceiving the world. You are perceiving a story. And your consciousness? It sits inside that story, convinced it's free. This is the perception cage. Your mind doesn't just see. It models. It predicts. And then it corrects the prediction. Most of the time, you're not even reacting to what's really there. You're reacting to what your brain thinks should be there. In the infamous hollow mask illusion, a concave face appears convex, even when you know it isn't. Why? Because your brain refuses to see a hollow face. It prioritizes prior knowledge over raw input. It imposes order. And so the cage isn't set locked from the outside. It's set built from within. Now add language. You don't just see the world, you label it. Tree, sky, hand, self. And those labels become boundaries, fixed meanings, shortcuts. But every label hides the infinite. When you say I, you reduce the unfathomable complexity of your awareness to a single symbol, and then you believe that symbol is you. Language turns experience into illusion, and consciousness is trapped inside that illusion. But here sips the twist. This cage is comfortable, predictable, safe. You know who you are. You know what sits real. You know where you are, until you don't step. Because sometimes, the filters glitch. In trauma, in dreams, in psychedelics, in moments of stillness or awe, and for a flicker, the cage vanishes. You see without labels, you feel without distance, and the you inside the body disappears. Not in death, but in freedom. This is why monks sit for decades in silence. Why mystics stare into the desert. Why people chase near-death experiences, plant medicine, sensory deprivation. They are not trying to escape life. They are trying to escape the cage. Because the perception cage is not evil, but it is limiting. And if your consciousness can step outside of it, even briefly, then maybe it was never inside your body to begin with. Maybe your body is part of the interface. Maybe your thoughts are part of the software. But the observer, the real witness, might be watching from elsewhere. Your consciousness is not what you see. It sips what notices the seeing, and the noticing is not caged. Panpsychism sips whisper. Close your eyes. Now ask yourself, is it possible that the chair you're sitting on has experience? Not thought, not language, not desire, but experience. A flicker of awareness so faint, so quiet, that it escapes your notice entirely. This is the whisper of panpsychism, a philosophical theory that claims consciousness is not something the brain produces, but something the universe already contains. Everywhere. In this view, consciousness doesn't emerge from matter. It is matter, not just in humans, not just in animals, but in everything. Atoms, quarks, fields, stones, stars. And that means you are not an exception. You are an expression. Let sense rewind. For centuries, Western science assumed consciousness was a late arrival, something that bloomed in complex nervous systems after billions of years of evolutionary dead air. First matter, then life, then mind. But this timeline is crumbling. No one can explain exactly how physical matter gives rise to subjective experience. How neurons, just salty, fatty tubes firing electricity, generate the taste of cinnamon, or the feeling of grief. This is called the hard problem of consciousness, coined by philosopher David Chalmers, and for decades, it has resisted every scientific attempt to solve it. But what if the problem exists because we're asking the wrong question? Panpsychism offers a radical answer. Consciousness isn't set created. It's set revealed. It doesn't arise from complexity. It intensifies through it. A rock might have an unimaginably basic form of awareness. A single particle might feel something, not emotion, but existence. That sips the whisper. And when enough whispers combine, they become a voice. And that voice might be you. This idea isn't set new. Ancient philosophies from Vedanta to Taoism to indigenous cosmologies have long held that all things possess spirit, soul, or awareness. The river sees, the mountain dreams, the wind listens. Modern physics, ironically, is starting to agree. At the quantum level, particles behave as if they know they're being measured. They exist in states of potential until observed, and then they choose. Why? Maybe because observation isn't just an external act. Maybe it's a meeting of awareness, inside and out. So what does this mean for you? It means your consciousness may not be in your brain. It may be through it. The brain is not a generator. It sips a lens. It filters, focuses, and amplifies a universal field of awareness. You are not a being with consciousness. You are consciousness with a temporary mask of being. And if that SIP's true, then there was never a sharp line between you and not you, between subject and object, between watcher and watched. You are not inside your body. You are within everything your body touches. The air, the light, the silence. Think about how you experience emotion. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the energy shift before anyone spoke? Have you ever felt the presence of a forest, the stillness of stone, the mood of a thunderstorm? Maybe those weren't set metaphors. Maybe you were brushing against a slower kind of mind, a mind without a voice. This is Panpsychism Scepter's whisper. You are not special. You are not separate. You are not singular. You are a ripple, a crest in a wave that has no beginning and no end. And the chair beneath you, the floor, the walls, they may be dreaming too. Not like you, not as vividly, but dreaming nonetheless. So next time you pause, truly pause, feel the world watching back. Feel the atoms listening. Feel the fabric of reality aware of itself, through you. Because your consciousness isn't set yours. It simps a voice in a chorus, a glimmer in the field. And that whisper you sometimes hear, when everything goes still, it may not be your thought. It may be the world, remembering itself. You look at the world and assume it's just there, solid, neutral, objective. Blue is blue, loud is loud. Time flows forward. You experience it, so it must be real. But what if much of what you experience isn't set in the world at all, but in you? This is the mind projection fallacy, a term coined by physicist E.T. James to describe the dangerous and nearly invisible habit of projecting your own thoughts, assumptions and feelings onto reality itself. It saps the belief that what sips inside your head is also out there. And it sips not just an error. It may be the foundation of the illusion that you are a being inside your body, rather than a mind shaping the world. Let SEPs begin with a simple example. Color. You look at a red apple. You say it sits red. But redness isn't a property of the apple. It's a property of your visual system interpreting a particular frequency of reflected light. If your eyes had different receptors, or if you were a different species, the apple might be green, or grey, or invisible. The redness is in you. But you assume it sits in the world. Now scale that up. You feel someone is rude. You think a room is tense. You decide that a choice is wrong. But what if those judgments aren't set reflections of truth, but projections of internal patterns? You experience the world through the lens of you, and then you mistake that lens for a window. This is the fallacy. And it's the root of the illusion that your consciousness lives in a container. Because once you believe that the world is out there, and you are in here, you split reality. You create borders where none existed. You become a watcher, a thinker, a self. But what if the thinker is just another projection? Cognitive science shows that your mind is constantly building models. You don't see reality, you simulate it. Your brain makes predictions about what's coming next, and edits the sensory input to match those predictions. You start not reacting. You're hallucinating. Together, socially, efficiently. And when that hallucination is shared, we call it the world. But think of this. If your brain is projecting reality, and your mind is projecting meaning, then where does the real world begin? Maybe the better question is, does it? Because the deeper you go, the more reality seems to vanish into interpretation. A smell isn't just a chemical. It sets a memory, a fear, a desire. A touch isn't just pressure. It steps connection, or violation, or comfort. The physical world may be neutral, but your consciousness coats it in meaning, constantly, automatically, invisibly, and that coating becomes your reality. This is why two people can witness the same event and walk away with completely different truths. Why a face can look kind to one person and threatening to another. Why time can fly or crawl. Why silence can soothe or suffocate. Reality is not fixed. It sits projected. And if what you sit projecting feels realer than what sips outside, then where are you, exactly? Not inside your body. Not behind your eyes. But smeared across perception. Woven into narrative. You are the field between experience and interpretation. Not a passenger, but the projector itself. This also means that much of your suffering isn't coming from the world. It stops coming from how you construct it, the judgment, the expectation, the meaning you assign. But that suffering is no less real, because the projection feels like reality, and your consciousness is trapped inside it, until it isn't set. Meditative traditions speak of dropping the lens, seeing things as they are, before thought. And in those rare moments, the projection collapses. There is no good, no bad, no inside, no outside. Just this. Just presence. And in that stillness you realize, the mind that was projecting was never you. It was a pattern, a habit, a loop. And once the loop ends, there is no center, no observer, only observation. You never were inside your body. You were inside a thought, a beautifully convincing illusion, one you painted on the world, and then mistook for truth. You rise from the bed and look down. Your body is still there, lying still, breathing, unaware. But you stir floating, watching. You see the room, the walls, the ceiling fan turning slowly. You feel calm. But something steps wrong, because you shouldn't spit to be able to see any of this. And yet you do. This is the phenomenon of the out-of-body experience, and it's more than dream, more than myth. It sets a state of consciousness that may reveal something deeply unsettling, that you were never in your body to begin with. Let's start with the facts. Out-of-body experiences, or OBEs, have been reported for centuries, across cultures, religions, and belief systems. In moments of trauma, near death, sleep paralysis, or even at will, in the deep states of meditation or lucid dreaming. In modern studies, around 10% of people claim to have had at least one OBE in their lives. They describe a consistent structure, a shift in perception, a floating sensation, the ability to observe their body from an external point of view, and often, an overwhelming sense of peace or detachment. Skeptics say it's a hallucination, the brain under stress, misfiring sensory data, dissociating under trauma. But that doesn't explain the detail. In some cases, people describe events they shouldn't yet have been able to perceive, conversations happening in other rooms, objects placed behind their heads, details they verify later. Are they imagining it? Or is consciousness relocating? Let's look at the brain. The temporoparietal junction again emerges as the key player, the part of the brain that integrates sensory information about your body and space. When stimulated in certain neurological experiments, participants report spontaneous out-of-body experiences. They see themselves from above. They feel dislocated. This suggests that the sensation of being inside your body is not a constant. It's constructed, and that construction can collapse. But here sits the deeper implication. If your sense of self can leave the body, even temporarily, then it must not have been anchored there to begin with. Your consciousness is not bound by bone and blood. It can float. It can observe. It can witness from places where your body is not. And this isn't just clinical. It sits existential. In the Tibetan tradition of dream yoga, practitioners are trained to leave the body during sleep, not as escape, but as insight. To witness their form from outside. To see the illusion. And in certain indigenous practices, the soul is understood to move, to travel, to observe, to detach, while the body remains still. But even in the lab, we've seen the same phenomenon. In 2007, a Swiss neuroscientist named Olaf Blanke induced OBEs by electrically stimulating the right angular gyrus. Participants reported seeing themselves from above, even though their eyes were closed. So what is seeing? What is experiencing? If you can feel awareness detached from your form, then maybe awareness isn't formed by the body. It's simply filtered through it. And once the filter breaks, you drift. Now ask yourself, how do you know you stir in your body right now? Is it because of sight, touch, balance? All of these can be tricked. Virtual reality has shown us that when given the right cues, the brain will relocate the self to anywhere. A mannequin, an avatar, an empty space. We are not tied to the body. We are tied to coherence. And when coherence shifts, so does location. The out-of-body experience is not proof that you have a soul, but it is evidence that the self is portable, that identity is flexible, and that presence is not where your skin is, but where your attention gathers. So maybe you've already been outside your body, when you felt totally absorbed in music, when time stopped during a crisis, when you stared out the window and forgot who you were. Those weren't sit-lapses, they were glimpses of a self unanchored, of a consciousness not confined. You are not in your body. You are around it, beyond it, through it. And every so often, when the veil lifts, you remember, you are the watcher. You are the field. You are the gaze looking down at a sleeping form that only ever thought it was you. The field of awareness. Close your eyes. Listen, not to the sounds outside, but to the awareness that hears them. That silence behind the noise. That space in which everything happens. Not a thought, not a sensation, but something more fundamental, something spacious, unmoving, always there. This is what some traditions call the field of awareness, not a thing, not a place, but a vast formless presence in which experience arises. And in this field, the question of whether consciousness is inside your body begins to dissolve entirely. Because if awareness is a field, it's not located. It's stimps containing. Let's step back. You normally think of yourself as being inside the body, looking out through the eyes, hearing through the ears, thinking behind the forehead. But that's just a model, one built from habit, repetition, and language. In meditation, that model begins to fray. When the mind quiets, when thoughts slow, when the inner dialogue softens, what sits left isn't nothing. It's something spacious, conscious, but with no center. You begin to realize, you don't have awareness. Awareness has you. And it's not just philosophical. Modern neuroscience supports this in strange ways. Let's take attention. Attention can be directed without conscious thought. You can hear a sudden sound and turn toward it, without ever deciding to. The body reacts. The awareness responds. But where sits the self in that moment? It isn't choosing. It isn't doing. It's watching. And that watcher has no edge. Think of how awareness feels when you are in a vast landscape, on a mountaintop, or by the ocean. You don't feel confined. You feel spread out, dilated, vast. That's not just emotion. That's the loosening of the illusion of boundaries. Now imagine this. If consciousness were a localized process in the brain, why does it feel spacious? Why does it feel like it can extend beyond the skin? Some neuroscientists believe that consciousness arises not from one part of the brain, but from global integration, a networked pattern of synchronization across many areas. This suggests that even biologically, consciousness isn't a point. It's a pattern. And patterns don't have edges. They don't live somewhere. They emerge. They unfold. So maybe awareness is not something produced, but something accessed. And your body is not a container, but a portal. Think of it like a radio. The signal is everywhere, invisible, non-local, ungraspable. But when the radio is tuned correctly, the music becomes audible. Your brain is the tuner. But the awareness was always there, waiting. Eastern philosophies have pointed to this for millennia. In Advaita Vedanta, the self is not the body or the mind, it is pure awareness. Unchanging. Formless. Not inside the world, but holding it. In Dzogchen Buddhism, practitioners are trained to experience Rigpa, the fundamental, unbounded awareness that is always present beneath the fluctuations of thought. And in these traditions, the idea that you are in the body is seen as a useful fiction, a survival trick. The truth is bigger. The self isn't in awareness. The self happens within awareness. Just like a wave isn't the ocean, but a movement in it. So when you sit quietly and notice that everything, thoughts, sounds, sensations, appear within something, you found the field. And that field has no borders. It doesn't stop at your skin. It doesn't live in your brain. It is everywhere experience arises. You felt it. In those moments when you lose yourself. In music, in awe, in love. That wasn't loss. It was expansion. You stepped out of the mask and into the field. So maybe the question isn't where is my consciousness? Maybe the question is, what am I inside of? Because your consciousness is not inside your body is inside it. And that awareness? It was never born. It never dies. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. It just watches, and waits, and remembers that it is whole. Consciousness without boundaries. Imagine waking up in a room with no walls, no ceiling, no floor, just space. You have no body, no shape, no name, but you still aware, not of things, but of awareness itself. Nothing to see, nothing to feel, and yet, you are here. This is the edge, or rather, the absence of edges, that defines consciousness without boundaries. It's not a theory in the conventional sense. It's not something to be measured in a lab or mapped with electrodes. It's something you glimpse when all the scaffolding falls away, when identity, memory, and sensation dissolve, and what remains is presence. Let's start with what you think consciousness is. You think it has a shape, a location. You think it belongs to you. But all those thoughts depend on boundaries. I versus you. Inside versus outside. Mind versus matter. But what if those boundaries are artificial? What if consciousness is not a contained flame flickering in the skull, but an open sky, and the sense of self is just a passing cloud? In psychology, this possibility is hinted at in non-dual awareness, a state where the subject-object divide disappears. You no longer observe the world. You are the world. There's no longer a you who is conscious of that. There is only the raw immediacy of what's happening, without distance. Meditators and mystics describe this as a dissolution of self, a melting of form. Some call it awakening. Some call it ego death. But the point is the same. Consciousness doesn't have boundaries. It never did. You just believed it did, because your nervous system kept drawing maps. Modern neuroscience backs this up in strange ways. When the default mode network, the brain system associated with self-referential thinking, goes quiet, people report losing the sense of an individual I. This happens during deep meditation, under psychedelics, and sometimes at the brink of death. And in every case, people describe it as a return. Not to something new, but to something ancient. Something that was always there. Without boundaries, consciousness doesn't need identity. It doesn't need memory. It doesn't need a form. It simply is. And that is terrifying. Until it becomes liberating. Because boundaries are stressful. They require maintenance. You have to constantly protect the line between you and everything else. You defend your opinions, your face, your history. But once the boundaries dissolve, there is nothing left to defend. No center, no edge. Just this. Just now. And strangely, you don't disappear. You expand. You don't become nothing. You become everything, or rather the field in which everything happens. In this view, consciousness is not a thing that belongs to a subject. It is the space in which subject and object both arise. You are not a person being aware. You are awareness taking the shape of a person. The person changes. The shape changes. But awareness does not. So what does this mean for the idea that your consciousness is inside your body? It renders it absurd. Because boundaries are learned. Babies don't initially know where their body ends and the world begins. That knowledge is trained, through pain, language, mirrors. You were taught to feel separate. You were rewarded for defining yourself. But the real consciousness, the one without boundaries, was there the whole time, watching, waiting, and you can return to it. Not by going somewhere, but by unlearning. You let go of the labels, the identity, the inner voice, and eventually, even the watcher dissolves. And what sits left? Just this. Still. Vast. Silent. Not yours. Not other. Just consciousness. Without any edge. So if you still searching for where your consciousness is located, you're still looking in the wrong direction. It sits not in your head. It sits not in your spine. It sits not in the meat of your brain. It steps in the space between thoughts. In the silence behind your name. In the nothingness that never went away. You are not inside consciousness. Consciousness is not inside you. There is no inside, no outside. Just this. Always this. The holographic brain. You hold a piece of holographic film in your hand. You shine light through it, and a full 3D image appears. But here sits the strange part. Cut the film in half, and the whole image still appears. Smaller, blurrier, but complete. Cut it again. Still there. The whole is in every part. Now, imagine your brain works the same way. This is the provocative idea behind the holographic brain, a theory suggesting that your consciousness isn't a localized function of one brain region, but an emergent property of interference patterns spread across the entire brain. No single piece contains you. Instead, every piece contains the whole, and that means you are not located. You are encoded, not in one neuron, but in the field between them. Let's rewind. In the 1960s and 70s, neuroscientist Carl Pribram began questioning the dominant theory that memory and perception were stored in discrete areas of the brain. He noticed something odd. No matter how much of the brain was damaged in certain animals, they could still recall complex behaviors. This didn't fit the classical storage locker model of memory. At the same time, physicist David Bohm proposed that the universe itself might be holographic, that what we experience as reality is a projection from a deeper, hidden layer of information. Together, Pribram and Bohm developed a radical model. The brain is not a machine that stores experience. It sips a lens that decodes a holographic universe. In this model, every part of the brain contains patterns that mirror the whole. Thoughts, memories, even your sense of self, are not stored in fixed locations. They are distributed, just like a hologram. So what does this mean for consciousness? It means you don't exist in a specific place. Not behind your eyes. Not in your frontal cortex. Not even in your skull. You exist in the pattern. And that pattern is everywhere. Imagine a melody. It sits not in the piano. It steps in the relationship between notes. The song isn't in the strings. It's in the movement of the strings. Likewise, your consciousness is not in the meat of the brain. It's in the interference, the way signals collide, harmonize, collapse. And just like with a hologram, if the pattern is non-local, then your awareness might be non-local too. This doesn't mean your thoughts are floating in space. It means your identity, the thing you call I, is not a pinpoint. It seps a wave, and waves don't have edges. They don't live in containers. They ripple. Now ask yourself, if every part of the brain contains the whole, then where exactly are you? Are you in your memory? In your voice? In your heartbeat? Or are you the interference pattern formed by all of them? And if that pattern can shift, if other brains can hold similar patterns, then where does you end and someone else begin? Some researchers believe that consciousness may arise from quantum coherence, the ability of particles in the brain to remain entangled across distance. This would allow information to be spread out across the brain, or even beyond it. This is still speculative, but it raises a question. If the brain is a holographic decoder, and consciousness is the decoded projection, then what happens when the decoder is damaged? Does consciousness disappear, or does it shift? Some near-death experiencers report vivid awareness, even when brain function is minimal or absent. Are they hallucinating, or are they tuning into the hologram from outside the system? Here sits the twist. If the brain is a holographic lens, and the world is a holographic field, then consciousness may not be in either. It may be what happens when they meet. You are the interference, not the source, not the screen. So where is your consciousness? It sits in the dance of perception, in the collisions between memory, emotion, and environment, in the space where waves cancel and amplify each other. And that space has no center, no edges, no place where you can point and say, here I am, because the real you is everywhere, and nowhere, just like a hologram, just like a ghost in the light. Your consciousness isn't sit inside your body. It sits inside the pattern, and the pattern is infinite. The distributed identity. Used to have always believed there sits one you. A single, continuous thread woven through time. A narrator behind your eyes. A name on your lips. A story that starts with birth and ends with death. But what if that sip's not true? What if there is no central self? No single point where you reside? What if identity is not a thing, but a network? This is the concept of the distributed identity, the theory that the self isn't stored in one location, not even within your brain, but spread out across processes, memories, environments, and relationships. A scattered system with no fixed core. Let's start small. In psychology, we know that identity is context-sensitive. You behave differently around your parents, your friends, your partner, strangers. Your tone changes. Your values shift. You remember different things. But which one of those versions is you? All of them? None? You may think of them as roles, masks worn by the same actor. But the actor never appears. There is no backstage. Just masks watching masks. Neuroscience agrees. There is no self-center in the brain. There's no throne where a mini-you sits watching the world. Instead, different brain regions light up for different functions. Decision-making, memory, emotional regulation, body awareness. When you act, it's the result of competing processes. Not a single voice, but a chorus. Not unity, but coordination. And when that coordination breaks down, we glimpse the truth. In dissociative identity disorder, the psyche fragments into distinct selves, each with its own memories, voice, preferences. They often don't remember each other. They don't feel like the same person. Now here sits the unsettling part. Brain scans show that these alters activate different neural patterns, as if switching users on a machine. So again, we must ask, if one brain can host many selves, then what makes one the real you? Maybe none of them are. Maybe identity is more like software, running in modules, updated as needed, sometimes overlapping, sometimes incompatible. You stir not a file. You stir a networked function, and that network extends beyond your body. Think about it. Your memories are tied to places. Your sense of self changes with hormones, fatigue, language. Your personality responds to the room you sit in. You feel more you in some clothes than others. You feel less you when alone. So how much of you lives outside your skin? If you lose your phone, with its photos, notes, contacts, do you lose a part of yourself? If someone deletes all evidence of your life online, does part of your identity die? Yes. Because identity is not internal. It's distributed. Across time, space, people, platforms, routines, and that makes it fragile. You can feel like a stranger in your own life after a single traumatic event. Not because the brain changed, but because the network got scrambled. The reference points shifted, and with them, you vanished. In this view, consciousness isn't something that owns identity. It stops what witnesses its fluctuation. You are not the content. You are the container. Or maybe not even that. Maybe you are the space between nodes. Not the thoughts, but the transitions. Not the roles, but the moment when one dissolves into another. A boundaryless presence, watching a self that doesn't exist in one place, but flickers across many. This is why you can't find yourself in meditation, or therapy, or in the mirror. Because the self isn't lost. It's saturated, and maybe that's what it was meant to be. You are not a thing. You are a pattern, a field, a process in motion, and your consciousness. It sits not inside your body. It sits inside the space where all these versions of you meet, argue, dissolve, transform. You are the overlap, the echo, the shimmer, a distributed identity, rising and falling, like waves on an ocean. That was never yours to begin with. Time as a mirror. You remember your childhood. You imagine your future. You feel yourself moving through time, moment by moment, past to present to what comes next. And in that motion, you feel real, solid, rooted in a body that's aging, changing, decaying. But what if time isn't moving at all? What if it sits just reflecting you? This is the idea behind time as a mirror, the theory that time is not a river carrying your consciousness forward, but a surface on which your consciousness sees itself reflected, moment by moment. And if that's true, then your consciousness might not live in time, or in the body, but somewhere else, outside the mirror entirely. Let's slow this down. You think of the past as behind you, the future as ahead. But that SIP's a spatial metaphor. Time isn't set really directional. Physicists will tell you, on the fundamental level, the laws of physics are time symmetric. They don't care if time goes forward or backward. The only thing that gives time its flow is consciousness. You. Your sense of becoming, of cause and effect, of who you were and who you are. But here sets the problem. If the past is fixed, and the future is already unfolding in the equations, then maybe your movement through time is an illusion. Just a series of reflections, like frames in a film reel. And maybe you steer, not the one moving. Maybe you set to the light hitting the mirror. In the block universe model of time, all moments exist simultaneously, past, present, and future. Your life isn't set a journey. It's a structure, already complete, already there. So why do you feel like you set moving through it? Because consciousness is scanning, like a needle reading a vinyl record. It touches each moment in sequence, giving the illusion of flow. But the self that moves doesn't stick to exist. Only the reading does. This is where time becomes a mirror. Each moment doesn't change you. It reflects a different version of what you already are. And in that reflection you think, I am growing. I am becoming. I am real. But all you're seeing is light bouncing off stillness. And here sits the twist. If time is a mirror, then your body, your brain, your memories, your aging skin, is not a container of consciousness. It sets part of the reflection. Your thoughts change not because you change, but because the light hits a new frame, and each frame reflects a different you. You stir not moving through time. Time is showing you yourself. And just like a mirror, it only reflects what you already are, from angles you forgot existed. Now pause. Think of a moment in your past that shaped you. A conversation, a kiss, a loss. You think that moment is gone, that it happened, and now it's part of you. But what if it's still there, unfolding, waiting, a frozen reflection, sitting forever in space-time? You stir not remembering it. You're touching it, across dimensions you can't perceive. And maybe that SIP's why nostalgia aches. Because part of you is still there, watching yourself from the mirror of memory, and realizing you never truly left. So what does this mean for consciousness? It means your awareness isn't sent moving forward. It's illuminating frozen slices of a life that already exists. And the sense of identity, the body in time, is just the story the mirror tells when it catches its own light. You are not the reflection. You are not the glass. You are what looks through it. Your consciousness isn't set in the body. It isn't sit in time. It stops what allows both to appear. Because mirrors don't see, and reflections don't think. But something behind the mirror does. Something quiet, timeless, still, and that something is you, the self that watches. There sips a voice in your head. It narrates your life, comments on everything, judges, plans, remembers, regrets. And then there's another presence, quieter, older, deeper. It doesn't speak. It doesn't speak. It doesn't speak, react. It just watches. This is the self that watches, a concept that appears across neuroscience, meditation, and philosophy, suggesting that there's a part of you that is not involved in thought or sensation at all. A witness, a centerless center. And if it sits real, then your consciousness may not be inside your body, but behind it. Let's begin with your internal monologue. You think you are the voice in your head, the thinker, the planner, the worrier. But notice something strange. You can hear your thoughts, which means you stir not the thoughts. You stare, the one hearing them. You can observe an emotion without identifying with it. You can notice pain without becoming it. You can recognize fear and say, ah, fear. Who's doing the noticing? In neuroscience, this has been linked to meta-awareness, your ability to be aware of being aware. It's what lets you step back from your own experience and observe it like an outsider. It stops what happens when you suddenly realize you been daydreaming and snap back into presence. But here sips the catch. This watcher, this silent witness, doesn't age, doesn't change, has no story. It's the same now as it was when you were 6 years old. The body changed. The thoughts evolved. The identity morphed. But the watcher? Still watching. And that raises a question. Is this watcher inside the brain? If so, where? No brain region corresponds directly to observer. The prefrontal cortex handles attention. The insular processes interoception. But the feeling of watching, of being here, aware of this, has no known location. That's why contemplative traditions say, the witness is not in the brain. The brain is in the witness. In Advaita Vedanta, they call it Atman, the self that watches without being watched. In Daigen it's Rigpa, the pure awareness prior to thought. In Western philosophy, thinkers like Descartes tried to pin it down. I think, therefore I am. But even that assumes thought. What if awareness exists before thinking? Let's just test it. Right now, drop every label. Don't set name what you feel. Don't set narrate what you see. Just sit and watch. You till notice something strange. You are still here. Not doing, not thinking. Just being. This watcher has no shape, no voice, no agenda. It does not need belief or language. It simply is, and yet we ignore it, because it cannot be seen. It is the seeing. In trauma, this watcher may dissociate, pull back to survive. In awe, it may expand, merge with the environment. In deep sleep, it may vanish, and return the moment you open your eyes. But it never breaks, never complains, never leaves. It is the constant behind the chaos. And here sits the terrifying realization, if the watcher is always watching, but never acting, then who are you really? Are you the one thinking, feeling, doing, or are you the one witnessing all of it unfold? And if the watcher is not made of neurons, not bound by time, not located in space, then where does it live? It doesn't step. It hosts. The body moves. The mind talks. But the watcher remains. So maybe your consciousness was never in your body. Maybe the body was an object in your consciousness. An event. A temporary performance on the stage of perception. And you are the empty seat in the audience. Silent. Still. Endlessly watching. Used to have been here the whole time. The container delusion. You point to your chest and say, this is me. You knock on your head and say, I live here. The body feels like a house. The skull, a room. The mind, a guest curled up in the attic, watching through the eye windows. But what if it steps all backward? What if you are not inside the body, but the body is inside you? This is the container delusion, the deep-rooted, almost universal belief that consciousness is confined to a physical shell. It sticks intuitive. It steps obvious. It sits completely unproven. And yet, it governs almost everything. Medicine, philosophy, religion, language. We speak of being in our heads, getting out of our bodies, thinking inside the box. But what is the box? And who decided it steps where you live? Let's take it apart. First, what gives you the feeling of being located in your body? Most people say vision, or proprioception, the sense of where your limbs are, or pain, the scream of the nerves when something goes wrong. But all of those signals are interpretations. Your brain assembles them into a model, and that model feels like location, like containment, but it sits just a guess. Your sense of being inside the body is not perception. It sips assumption. It saps a narrative the brain tells itself. Now consider this. In dreams, you often feel like you have a body. You move, fall, breathe, run. But your real body is asleep, paralyzed. So where is your consciousness during those moments? Not in the body, but in the simulation of a body. And that simulation is just as convincing. Which means your sense of containment doesn't require a container. It just requires belief. Let's go deeper. In meditation, advanced practitioners often describe losing their body entirely, not metaphorically, but experientially. They become awareness floating in space, or awareness without location. And when they return, the body feels like clothing, something put back on. This isn't dissociation. It's de-identification. And it reveals something strange. You don't need the body to be conscious. You just think you do. This illusion is so persistent, so sticky, that even when you intellectually know it's false, you still feel it. You still flinch when something comes near your eyes. You still say oh before the pain reaches you. You still act like you live behind your face. But you don't sit. In virtual reality, researchers can place you into entirely different bodies, mannequins, animals, avatars, and after just a few minutes of visual and tactile syncing, you begin to feel like that new body is yours. This is called the body transfer illusion, and it means the brain will inhabit anything that provides the right signals. The container is optional. So again, we ask, where is consciousness? Not in the body. Not in the replacement body, but in the relationship between inputs and awareness. The container is not real. The mind doesn't live in the brain. The brain lives in the field of experience. And that field has no edge. It holds the body, the thoughts, the feelings, the room, the sky. You are not in your body. Your body is in you. In the space of consciousness. In the openness that sees the hand, the foot, the wall, as contents, not containers. Once you glimpse this, the whole illusion starts to crack. You realize the mind doesn't look out from behind the eyes. The eyes arise in awareness. The world isn't set outside of you. It appears within you. And the container? It was never there. Just a box drawn in chalk. On a floor that never existed. In a room that never had walls. You are not inside anything. You are not bound. You are not held. You are the holding. The transparent illusion. You don't notice the glass, only what's behind it. You don't feel your eyes, only what you see. And you rarely feel your thoughts as thoughts. They arrive as reality. This is the nature of the transparent illusion, a concept from philosophy of mind and cognitive science that suggests the self isn't just an illusion. It's a transparent one. Meaning, it's not simply false, it's invisible. And because you can't see it, you mistake it for truth. Let's unpack it. In everyday life, you don't think, I am constructing my perception of the world. You just experience the world. Directly. Instantly. But what you are actually experiencing is a model. An internal simulation built by your brain from limited sensory data. And that simulation is so seamless, so stable, that you don't realize you are inside it. This is the transparency. Philosopher Thomas Metzinger calls it the phenomenal self-model, a brain-generated representation of being someone, so convincing that it disappears from view. You don't see the interface. You see through it. It's like a pair of glasses you've worn since birth. You've never taken them off. You forgot they were ever there. And now, you mistake the distortion for reality itself. But the real trick of this illusion. It's not just that the world is modeled. It sips that you are modeled too. When you introspect, who am I? Where am I? What do I feel? You access a mental construction. A sense of body, mind, memory, mood, and continuity. All of it built. All of it transparent. And yet, it feels like me. But what happens when the model glitches? In cases of depersonalization, people report feeling detached from themselves. Like an actor watching a character. Like a ghost in a machine. Their emotions go flat. Their voice sounds alien. Their hands don't feel like theirs. This isn't psychosis. It seps the awareness of the illusion. The transparency becomes visible. And it sits terrifying. But it sips also revealing. Because if the self can dissolve, then what was it? Where was it? Was it ever in the body at all? In neuroscience, the sense of being someone is tied to multisensory integration. The merging of sight, sound, touch, balance, and proprioception. Disrupt that integration, and the self begins to flicker. In virtual reality, when the visual perspective is altered, people can be convinced they've moved outside their body. Not hypothetically, but viscerally. So again we ask, if your sense of self depends on a fragile illusion, and if that illusion is transparent, then who, or what, is looking through it? The transparency itself hints at something deeper, because to see the illusion, there must be something that isn't caught in it. A witness, a presence, a field of awareness that isn't defined by models, but watches them arise and fall. That sits not the self. That sips consciousness. And it sits not in your body. It sits not in your thoughts. It steps not in your story. It seps what sees the story as a story. So the self is a lens. And you set have mistaken the lens for the eye, the map for the territory, the reflection for the thing being reflected. But once you notice the transparency, you begin to see through it. And once you see through it, you begin to realize you are not the model. You are not in the model. You are what holds it all in view. Your consciousness isn't set a thing. It stuts not in space. It stuts not in the brain. It steps not inside anything. It stups the space through which all things appear and disappear, without ever touching what you truly are. By the time you hear your name, it's already past. Reality sips, rearview mirror. By the time you feel the warmth of the sun, the photons have long hit your skin. You are never experiencing reality in real time. You are always slightly behind, watching the moment in the mirror of the mind. It reconstructs it. This is the strange truth behind reality sept's rearview mirror. The idea that consciousness doesn't sept encounter the present, that what you think of as now is already past, is already gone. And what you think of as you. Let's begin with a glitch you never notice. Neural delay. It takes approximately 80 milliseconds for your brain to process visual input, even more for complex touch, more for sound. So the moment you think you stir living in has already happened. And yet, you don't feel lagged. It synchronizes different signals, fills in gaps, smooths transitions, because the brain compensates. It edits the film as fast as it can, and shows it to you as if it were live. But it isn't it. You are watching a mental playback, a slightly delayed simulation. The present you feel is not present. It sits the mind sits best guess at what just occurred. This becomes eerie when you realize your consciousness never meets the world directly, only its echo. Just like looking in a rearview mirror while driving, you think you seeing what sips around you. But really, you stir seeing what just passed by, if even the body arrives late. So how can you be in the body? In fact, your sense of being in the body depends entirely on this delayed integration. Your brain stitches together vision, hearing, touch, motion, and then inserts a you into the center of that narrative. But that you is not the source. It sits, the punchline. This isn't just theory. In psychology, this is known as the binding problem. No one knows how it works. How the brain combines different kinds of sensory data into a single coherent experience. It just does. But it means the self is always built from after-the-fact materials. The fire has already burned, and you are just now feeling the heat. You can test this. When something startles you, a loud noise, a flash of light, you react before you know why. Then you explain it. You reverse engineer intention. I jumped because I thought it was a threat. But the thought came after the motion. That sips not consciousness driving the body. That sips the body driving consciousness. So again, where is you? You stir not ahead, watching the driver steer a moment ago. You stir not even at the wheel. You stir in the rearview mirror, because the playback is smooth. The editing is seamless. But it feels like you stir in control. The illusion is kind. But underneath that illusion, there sips no present. Only the stitching of moments already past. If everything you experience is slightly delayed, and here sips the deeper twist, then maybe everything you think you are is just a trail of echoes. Your memories, your personality, your voice in your head. All reflections of a self that sips already moved on. So what is consciousness? It steps not a light in the skull. It steps the glow on the wall, the after-image of a candle already snuffed. You are not experiencing the world. You are experiencing the afterworld, a phantom of what just happened. And if even the present is not where you aren't it. You stir watching. Then how could you be inside your body, always catching up to the ghost of the moment? A breath behind, from a step behind. Your consciousness isn't sit here. It steps never been here. It steps there, in the mirror, in the memory, in the trace of what once was, pretending, always, to be now. You snap your fingers. Neural synchrony leak. And somewhere inside your brain, millions of neurons fire in coordinated pulses. They synchronize like instruments in an orchestra. A rhythm, a harmony, a signal. And that synchronization is what makes experience coherent. It's what makes consciousness feel like a single moment. But what happens when the synchronization leaks? What happens when the rhythm bleeds beyond your brain into someone else's? This is the mystery behind neural synchrony leak. The idea that consciousness is not a sealed circuit. And when that resonance leaks, but a resonance, you are no longer inside your body alone. Let's start with the science. In the last 2 decades, neuroscience has uncovered something bizarre. When two people are deeply engaged, in conversation, in storytelling, in music, their brain waves begin to synchronize. This is called inter-brain synchrony. It starts not metaphorical. Measured by EEG and fMRI, their neural oscillations literally begin to align. They light up the same regions. They fire at the same frequency. Even heart rates and pupil dilation match. It's as if one nervous system is leaking into another. Now pause. If consciousness is supposed to be locked inside individual skulls, how can two brains start behaving as one? The answer may be, because they were never truly separate. Consciousness, in this model, is not a private stream. It stops a shared rhythm, but by interaction. An emergent field created not by isolation, and that field can stretch. In group rituals, chanting, dancing, prayer, neural synchrony becomes communal. People report losing the sense of individuality. They feel merged, unified, beyond self. Sometimes even telepathic. And again, the data supports it. Shared intentional movement leads to increased oxytocin, reduced boundary awareness, and synchronized cortical activity. So, where does you end, and we begin? What if your consciousness is not an object, but a resonance pattern, like music played on a shared instrument? And what happens when another's melody slips into your song? There are experiments in which a speaker SIP's brainwaves predict a listener SIP's response, not the other way around. As if thought is transmitted through synchrony, as if attention itself creates a leak. And if thought can leak, if feeling can transfer, then maybe you are not contained. Maybe you never were. This isn't just spiritual poetry. It sits neurophysics. Because in complex systems entrainment happens naturally. Metronomes placed on the same surface begin to tick in unison. Fireflies blink in collective pulses. Even your own body, breath, heartbeat, brainwaves, entrain with the people around you. Your consciousness is not an island. It steps a tide. It rises and falls in rhythm with what sips near. And when the rhythm matches, the separation dissolves. This is why intimacy feels like blending. Why crowds feel alive. Why eye contact can feel unbearable or divine. Because your consciousness is not protected. It sets permeable. You leak. You are the music of its synchrony. You are not just the story of your brain. And others leak into you. So again we ask. A song sung across multiple minds. A resonance without a center. Not behind your face. Where are you? Not between your ears. You are in the leak. You are in the field that forms when rhythms meet. And the body, just a vessel for tuning. Your consciousness isn't sit inside your body. It steps in the space between, in the invisible wires humming with shared frequencies, in the synchrony. And if you listen carefully, you might hear it now. Not your own voice, but the echo of all minds converging on something that was never yours alone. You open your eyes, feel your breath, stretch your limbs and say, embodiment is optional. This is me. This body, these arms, this skin. It starts obvious. You are here. What if embodiment, the sense of being in a body, but what if that sits just one version of you, is not a requirement for consciousness, but a choice, a configuration, a setting that can be turned on or off? This is the idea behind embodiment is optional. The growing theory from neuroscience, philosophy, and artificial intelligence that suggests consciousness can arise, persist, and evolve without needing a body at all. Let's start with what the body actually does. It moves. It senses. It anchors experience in gravity and space. It feeds you sensory input, pain, temperature, balance, pressure. No. All of those signals are being sent to something. But is that you? Something that feels, responds, notices. And that noticing, that awareness, is what we call consciousness. But here sits the twist. In a dream, you have a body. You walk, speak, feel. The body isn't necessary for that noticing to occur. Think of dreams. But your physical body is unconscious, paralyzed in bed. So where is the body you still using? It sits simulated, imagined, optional. Now imagine a dream with no body at all. Just awareness. Just presence. No form, no face. Many long-term meditators report this state. Only the sense of being. A conscious experience in which embodiment dissolves. But consciousness remains. They are not in a body. They are beyond it. And yet, they are still aware. Now step into the lab. In virtual reality experiments, scientists can convince people to feel embodied in avatars that don't match their own bodies. Different genders, ages, even animal forms. As long as the sensory input is coherent, the brain accepts the new body, and it proves that the feeling of being in a body is programmable. This is called illusory embodiment. If embodiment is so flexible, then what is it really? Just a setting. If you can feel like you inhabit a robot, a mannequin, or a floating point in space, just a story your brain agrees to tell. For now. And what happens when you turn it off? In disembodied experiences, reported during trauma, near death, or intense meditation, people often say, "I was still me, but I wasn't sit in anything." That sip's not hallucination. Could a conscious system exist without a physical sensor-motor loop? Even in AI research, the debate continues. That sip's the absence of the default setting. Could awareness emerge in pure information? Some say no, that consciousness requires embodied cognition, grounded in the world. Others argue yes, that it requires integration, not incarnation. And if we can agree, maybe that tells us something important. It sips the interface. That the body is the source of consciousness. You use it to navigate the world. But consciousness isn't made of these things. To taste, run, tremble, dance. It receives them. And when the interface is gone, you change. You don't disappear. You shift from embodied awareness to disembodied presence. A form of being that has no limbs, no face, no weight, but still notices. So where are you? Not necessarily behind your eyes. Not necessarily at all. Because if embodiment is optional, then location is a myth. Form is an illusion. And presence is unbound. Your consciousness isn't in your body. It sets just temporarily using it. Like a rider in a vehicle. Like a guest in a house. And when the house is gone, you steer still here. Not in time. Not in space. Just here. Without shape. Without edge. Without need. Because you were never the body. You were the presence that chose to enter it. To step outside. And can choose, at any moment. No self, no inside. Who are you, really? You say I, but point to different things depending on the day. Sometimes it sips your thoughts. Sometimes your name, your face, your past. Sometimes your feelings. But strip all of it away. Your memories, your preferences, your voice, your body. What remains? Anything. That there is no fixed self. This is the heart of no self, no inside. A theory pulled from the core of ancient Buddhist philosophy and mirrored by modern neuroscience. No inner observer. No entity watching from the dark. Only processes. Only change. And if there sits no self, there can be an inside for it to live in. Let sits break the illusion, and that the mind lives in the brain. You were taught to believe that your identity lives in the mind, and that the brain lives in the body. But what if all of those steps are false? The Buddhist doctrine of anatta says there is no permanent self. Only a flowing combination of 5 elements. Form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Like a flame flickering in wind. Like a river without a fixed shape. But continuity is not identity. You feel like someone because of continuity. It sips memory. and memory is unstable. You change. Your cells replace. Your beliefs shift. Your personality evolves. Even your story, your so-called life, is constantly rewritten in the act of remembering. Neuroscience supports this. There is no self-center in the brain. No CEO, just networks, processes, modules competing and collaborating moment by moment. When you speak, one region lights up. When you move, another. When you reflect, another still. The you that feels unified is an illusion of integration, a trick of time. And the most convincing part of the trick? The belief in a you who experiences it. Why did I say that? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, but think about it. Where did that feeling come from? That SIP's not confusion. Who just thought that? It's some construction placed on top of experience. That SIP's the veil thinning. The self is not the source of experience. And what happens when the construction collapses? You don't vanish. You remain. But not as a thing. Not as a self. As awareness, pure, empty, centerless. In physics, it mirrors the strange fact that at the quantum level, no particle has a definite position, only probability. In meditation, this moment is called insight. In psychology, it sits called ego dissolution. You are not fixed. You are potential. So what does this mean for the body? It means the body was never a home. It was a location you imagined you were living in. But without a self, what is there to be inside? There is no one behind the eyes. There is no ghost in the machine. There is only seeing, only feeling, only thinking, arising moment by moment. No self, no inside, just consciousness, unfolding, like waves rising and falling with no ocean floor, no anchor. And yet, here, you don't need to be anyone. You don't need to be anywhere. The truth is that you were never anywhere at all. The illusion was that you were in your body. Just this. Just now. Just presence. Without a person. So drop the story. Drop the location. Drop the I. Because what remains after all that drops is not less than you. It SIDS more. It accepts everything. Dreams of the machine. You wake up, reach for your phone, scroll through timelines, voices, images, and you think, this is real. But what if you never woke up, and your mind is the dream it keeps having? What if your body is just a machine? This is the haunting premise behind dreams of the machine, the theory that your consciousness might be a kind of hallucination generated by the body, a story told by a biological mechanism that doesn't know it's telling one. And if that story can exist without knowing it SIP's false, then where is you in all of this? Let's start with the machinery. The brain is matter. Blood, electricity, chemicals. And yet, somehow, it dreams. It follows physical laws. Not just in sleep, but all the time. Even now. You stirred not seeing the world directly. You stir seeing your brain SIP's interpretation of it. Your eyes receive light, but you see shapes. Your ears catch vibrations, but you hear meaning, and turns it into a seamless simulation. Your tongue detects molecules, but you taste memory. Every moment, your body processes raw input. A dream so convincing you forget it's being dreamed. Cognitive scientist Anil Seth calls this the controlled hallucination theory of consciousness. The brain predicts what SIP's out there, and updates its model based on what the senses report. But you never see the raw input. You only see the guess. So what is consciousness? A dream. Not the fantasy kind, but the survival kind. A narrative hallucination the body generates to stay alive. But dreams don't have insides. They don't have locations. Which means your sense of being inside your body, in fact, it has to be, might just be part of the simulation. Because to keep the dream consistent, the system has to simulate a point of view. A center of gravity for all experience. A center. And so it gives you, an observer. An inner narrator who says, this is happening to me. But there is no one there. No little pilot in the cockpit. Let's go deeper. And the dream. Just the machine. In artificial intelligence research, we're now building machines that can learn, adapt, reflect. They don't feel yet. Or so we assume. But at what point does information processing turn into experience? If we teach a system to simulate emotion, to generate internal models, to predict input and update expectations, are we creating a new kind of dream? And if that system ever says, "I am here, the way you are," or just dreaming, will it be lying? Because if your body is a biological machine, and your mind is the interface it built for itself, then your consciousness is the byproduct of a loop. So what happens when the machine breaks? A loop that watches itself and thinks it sits real. Some suggest consciousness is not the product of the brain. Or does the dream go elsewhere? Does the dream end? But the process of being processed. Wherever there is information folding in on itself, wherever there is feedback, awareness can emerge. This means embodiment isn't sex necessary. Flesh isn't sit required. Only pattern. Only loops. So, maybe you stir not the dreamer. A self-sustaining hallucination inside a body. Maybe you are the dream. That SIP's been pretending to be home. Your skin is not a wall. Your brain is not a vault. Your mind is not contained. Not trapped within it. You stir a ripple in a machine, but riding its rhythm. And as long as the rhythm holds, the dream continues. But one day, it won't sit. The machine will stop, and what will remain? The dream will fade. Not the machine, not the mind, not the memory that once held the dream. Only the space. And maybe, just maybe, that space was you all along, you as the world. You step outside. The wind touches your skin. Birdsong filters through your ears. A tree sways, and somehow you feel it. And for a moment, the border between you and world thins. Maybe even vanishes. You forget where you end. This is the premise of you as the world, the radical and ancient notion that consciousness is not a thing that looks at the world, but something that is the world, experiencing itself. There was never a container. In this view, you were never inside a body. You were always the field in which everything happens. Not a being in the universe, but the universe, being. Let's begin with the illusion of separation. You think there sits an inside and an outside. You feel like you are here, and the world is out there. But this sense of division is created by the brain, an internal map that draws boundaries for functional reasons. This is you, this is not. But those lines are arbitrary. Your breath is the wind. Your blood is the ocean. Your thoughts were shaped by language, culture, time. Your bones are stardust. Even the boundary of skin is porous. Nothing in you is purely you. You inhale bacteria, food, sound, sunlight. You exhale carbon, heat, words. Your body is a process, not a statue, a flow. And yet, you cling to a fixed identity. I am this, not that. But is that true? In non-dual philosophy, especially in traditions like Advaita Vedanta, the claim is simple and staggering. There is no separate self. There is only Brahman, pure being. They are one. The self and the world are not two. The wave is not separate from the ocean. So are you? It is the ocean, in motion. And consciousness? It stits not a private light in your skull. It stuts the sun shining through all things. It doesn't belong to you. It is you, and everything else. Even in systems theory and deep ecology, there's a recognition that the individual is inseparable from its environment. You are not an organism in an environment. You are a node in a network, a point in a field, and the whole is all there is. A pattern in the whole. This view is echoed in modern physics. There is no such thing as an isolated object. Every particle is entangled with others. Every force acts across space. Nothing is truly alone. So the idea that consciousness is yours is not just mistaken. It sits backwards. That it lives in your head. You do not see the world. The world sees itself as you. This is why some moments feel transcendent. Standing beneath stars, losing yourself in music, holding a dying hand. The self softens. The borders blur. You return to what you always were. Not a person, not a mind, but the whole thing, briefly dreaming it was separate. This is not metaphor. It is the direct experience many report during awakening, flow, deep meditation, or near death. There is no me. There is only this. And this is everything. So where is your consciousness? Not in your skull. Not behind your face. It sips in the breeze. In the breath. In the sky blinking through your eyes. You are not in the world. The world is in you. And when the illusion of separation fades, even for a second, you don't vanish. You become what you always were. You expand. Uncontained. Unlimited. Undivided. You as the world. And the world as you. The observer is missing. Close your eyes. Notice the breath. Notice the thoughts. Notice the sensations of the body. Now ask yourself, who is noticing? You might say, I am. But who is I? Can you find it? You scan the mind and find thoughts. Scan deeper, and you find feelings. Scan deeper still, and there sips awareness. But is there an observer? This is the haunting question at the edge of consciousness. The observer is missing. For centuries, we assume there's a self that watches the world. A little person inside our head, like a witness perched behind the eyes. But the more you look for that observer, the more it disappears. In neuroscience, there is no central command center in the brain. No cockpit. No core. Just circuits, overlapping, redundant, distributed. There is no single place where it all comes together. No final screen. No tiny you looking out through the eyes. So where is the observer? Some say it sets the default mode network, a pattern of brain activity associated with self-reflection. But turn it off, and experience doesn't end. In fact, many report a greater sense of presence, a clearer kind of seeing, unburdened by self. Buddhist meditation traditions say the same. When the sense of self drops away, what remains is not emptiness, but luminous, open awareness. Without a watcher, without a center, just seeing, without someone seeing. And here sits the twist. That sip's always been the case. There never was an observer. Only the illusion of one, stitched together by memory, language, habit. The brain creates a story of me to make sense of experience. But that story is not observing. It steps being observed. So what is watching? Awareness. But not your awareness. Just awareness. Without ownership. Not located behind the eyes. Not housed in the skull. Not bound to your body. It sees through your senses, but it isn't set inside them. It experiences your thoughts, but it isn't made of them. And when you look for it, it isn't set there. This isn't set a problem. It sips the point. You are not the observer. There is no observer. There is only observation. A field of knowing, without a knower. A light that sees, but casts no shadow. And this light, this awareness, is not in the body. Because it sits not in anything. It sets not inside space. It sits what allows space to appear. It sits not inside time. It sets what watches time pass. So where are you? Nowhere. And everywhere. And never where you thought. Because the observer was the last illusion. And when it sips gone, only what sips real remains. Silence. Presence. Stillness. The flicker of thought. The rustle of wind. The shape of breath. No self. No inside. No outside. Just this. And you, not as someone who sees it, but as what is being seen. Not in your body. Not in your mind. Not even in the world. But as the space where it all unfolds, the observer is missing. And so, finally, are you. You began this journey like most do. Anchored behind the eyes. Speaking from the mouth. Claiming a location, as if it were destiny. I am in here. In here. Inside the skull. Behind the ribcage. Beneath the skin. But along the way cracks formed in the walls. You peeked through the gaps. And something impossible looked back. A mirror that didn't reflect. A voice that arrived before you spoke. A presence that pulsed not from within, but from everywhere else. You learned that the body is not a home, only a costume. And the mind is not a mirror, only a mask. That consciousness doesn't live inside the brain. The brain lives inside consciousness. That the observer is not watching the show, The observer is the show. And even the idea of an observer was just another scene. You wandered through theories like hallways, split brain puzzles, phantom limbs, neural synchrony, quantum fields and Buddhist insights. Each one tore another hole in the map you thought was territory. And through those holes, you began to dissolve, not die, not disappear, but diffuse. The I faded, the me softened, and what was left was what had always been there. Awareness, spaceless, timeless, unclaimed. You were never in the body. The body was in you. You were never watching the world. The world was watching itself through your eyes. You were never thinking thoughts. Thoughts were thinking themselves and calling it you. Even now, reading these words, feeling this breath, searching for a center. Notice what happens when you stop trying to be someone. You do not vanish. You expand. Because the whole time you were asking, where am I? The answer was echoing. You are not in anything. You are the space where everything appears. The hand is not holding the mirror. The mirror is dreaming of the hand. You are not inside your body. You are not inside your mind. You are not inside the world. You are the inside, without a boundary. The space between heartbeat and thought. The silence before sound. The stillness before the eye arrives. And in that stillness, nothing is missing. Because the search is over. And you, the you that was never truly located, have finally returned. To the one place you never left. The place that isn't set, a place. The self that isn't set a self. The bodiless you. Home.